Good evening, students, colleagues. I hope that you are very, very well this evening. My name is Leisha Nikudemans. I am a professor of religion and media, and this evening I am going to be doing part 2 of the proposal development workshop with you, and I'm going to take you through a guided tour of what happens after part 1, I suppose, which I will be recapping. I'm going to switch my camera off now, and I'm going to switch to presenting the slideshow. If you'll just be patient with me, thank you. All right. So, the overview of this presentation, first of all, I'd like to explain to you about the NQF levels that you are, well, that's going to be very important to you, and that is level 9 and then level 10, Masters and PhD respectively. And we're going to speak a little bit about these levels and their characteristics and also what they mean. We're then going to think a little bit about research beyond just the academy. Well, within the academy, but beyond the academy. And we're going to talk about UNISA's catalytic niche areas, but we're going to speak about them also in relation to the SDG goals. And I'm going to try and give you some thinking points for you to ponder as you consider what you're going to be doing around with your research. We're then going to think about the concept of a research proposal. We'll talk about your proposal defense and how to prepare for the proposal defense. And then we will think together about the concept of a thesis, and also the practice of producing a thesis. And then we will speak a little bit about the Viva, which is compulsory for PhD students, not for master students, but it is a compulsory part of your examination as a PhD student. And I hope that we'll be able to demystify some of the myths around the Viva and also allay any concerns that you might have. So that is the overview of our time together this evening. But before we start, I think that I'd like to give you 5 minutes, 5 minutes to share something in the chat. Now, I'd like you to share in the chat one word to describe your expectations of this session. Just one word. It can be around how you, I mean, if you want to add more words, that's absolutely fine. But what are your expectations? Do you want to find out more about the process of writing the proposal? Do you want to find out more about the soft skills that are required when it comes to writing a proposal? What is it that you are expecting from this session? I mean, my expectations, even as your facilitator is, after today's session, I'd like to feel inspired. I'd like to feel inspired about the possibility of being in a group and being with a group of people who are going to make research matter. And then, or in addition to it, I'd like you to share a word that describes how you feel about your research project in this moment. It might be excited, it might be enthusiastic, you might also be anxious, you might feel a little bit lost. But if you will, please indulge me by just sharing one word or 2 words. That's the minimum I'm asking you to share. But if you'd like to share a little bit more in the chat, please go ahead and do so. I will have a look at the chat and try and facilitate some conversation later on. But today, or at least yesterday or this year for you, marks a critical moment, an exciting step in your academic career. It's the beginning of turning your ideas into research. So the term research proposal development might not instantly ignite fireworks or get you excited, but here's the truth of the matter: this is really where the magic starts. This is where you get to craft and to claim your voice as a scholar. A research proposal is not just a bureaucratic requirement that the university has, right? It's not just something that you have to submit for the sake of submitting, because that's what the university does. It gives you a list of things that you need to do in order to get your certificate and have your graduation at the end of the day. But it is your vision statement. We don't do advanced research because we are looking for prizes or accolades. Well, some people do, you know, wanting to win Nobel Peace Prizes and those kinds of stuff. But it really is the space where you are going to define a problem that matters. And it's a problem that, and this is your opportunity to say, this is what I care about. This topic is what I care about, and I want to understand it more. And this is how I'm going to contribute to knowledge and to justice and to change, because we aren't just doing the work that we are doing for ourselves. We are doing it for our communities. We're doing it for our countries. We are doing it so that we can build a better, more just and safer work. So whether your work is going to be theoretical or it's going to be applied, whether it's grounded in policy or it's, I don't know, it's in literature and creativity and poetry, whether it's rooted in your community or you are studying something like, I don't know, astronomy. So it's rooted, it's not rooted in community, it's rooted in the sky. It all starts here. So this proposal and this time that you're going to have to produce this proposal for your research is really an important time that you should savor and that you should make the most of. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to take a lot of perseverance and rigor, but it will also require you to have or to use your imagination, right? And that's what I think is so exceptionally powerful about where we are at the moment, because you're not, when you shape your proposal, you aren't just preparing for this degree, whether it's your master's or whether it's your PhD, you are stepping into a really important role, and you are not just a student. You're not just somebody who's consuming knowledge, you become a producer of knowledge, right? So you become a researcher, you become a thinker, and you become an agent of change in our society. And we know that we don't have enough agents of positive change. And so we also can't forget about where we are. We're doing this work, particularly here in South Africa or on the continent. And we know that our continent and our country is rich in diversity, it's rich in culture, and it's a place of possibility, but also we still continue to grapple with the legacies of colonialism, apartheid, inequality, and exclusion. So there is this need for transformative research, and it's very urgent. And this is what you are doing. You are doing this good work, right? No field of study is neutral. And no field of study is irrelevant. Whether you are going to study marine biology, whether you're doing law, literature, nanotechnology, theology, media, your work can, and it should speak to the world that we live in, right? Every single discipline offers tools to make sense of injustice, to imagine alternative futures, and to help us build a more just, a more inclusive, diverse and sustainable society. So I want you to hold a question close as we move through this. What is the knowledge that only you can bring into the world? And how are you going to do it through your master's or your PhD project, right? And I think that together we are going to do this work. I am a scholar, but obviously I believe all scholars are scholars in the making. And so I'm still trying to do what you are trying to do here, right? Every day I'm trying to find ways to help build a more just and inclusive, diverse and sustainable society. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the frameworks within which we are engaging. And the first framework that I'm going to talk to you about, and this is important if you are a master's student, but also if you are a PhD student, you might want to look back and to ask yourself if you truly felt like you mastered these key competencies at your master's level, right? And if you don't think that you did, it's not too late. Even if you've got the master's degree already, it's just good for you to have an awareness of where you should be building some of your skills. So let's go to the key competencies at NQF level 9. Righto. So the key competencies at NQF level 9. So you need to show that you are able to engage critically with theory and its real world applications, right? Theory doesn't just take place in a vacuum. Theory is produced either as a response to phenomena in the world, or as a response to the phenomena in the world, or theory is produced in order to understand ongoing phenomena in the world, right? So it has a real world application. It cannot just be left at the level of hyper abstraction. So you need to be able to show that you can tackle complex problems using systematic and creative approaches. You need to also be able to show that you can make informed, evidence-based decisions and communicate them effectively, right? So then you have to show the ability to work independently with originality, initiative, and accountability, and show that you can produce research outputs such as technical reports, creative works, or academic articles. Now, I want to go back to the first point. Engage critically with theory and its real-world application. Now, what this means is you don't just learn the theories, but you have to engage them critically. This means that you have to ask questions, and these questions are usually related to the limitations of the theory that you are engaging. And then you have to ask the question of how it relates and it functions in real world settings. So for a master student, you have to go beyond just regurgitating or repeating existing frameworks, and you have to start interrogating the assumptions and the biases and the context behind these frameworks. So, for example, applying a feminist or decolonial theory to a mainstream case study can reveal embedded power relationships and silences, for instance, right? If we go to point 3, you are going to show, or you need to be showing, that you can deal with complex issues systematically and creatively. Now, research at the level that we are working at, that you are working at, which is advanced research, right? It involves grappling with multifaceted social, scientific, philosophical problems. Systematic thinking means that you are not being arbitrary. Your process is logical, it is evidence-based, and it's rigorous. At the same time, we also want to see creativity. And this is across all disciplines, right? Because creativity allows you to make innovative connections that other people have not done, to think outside of the boundaries of your discipline or the silos of your discipline, and to propose novel solutions to complex problems. So it's this balance between the structure that, working within a really systematic framework affords you, and then imagination that really characterizes advanced academic work. And this is something that you have to show you are able to do at a master's level already. Excuse me, I've just taken a sip of water. Now, you also, if we get to number 3 now, you have to make sound judgments and you have to communicate extremely clearly. Now, decision-making is key in this, right? But you have to select your research question. You have to choose your methods and you have to interpret your results. You are doing that work. Yes, it is framed by systematic and creative approaches. Yes, you engage theory, but you are making those choices as the researcher, right? So these judgments, the choices that you are making, you need to be able to defend them. They must be grounded in your theory, they must be grounded in your data, and they must be grounded in a strong sense and commitment to research ethics. So you have to be able to communicate these ideas effectively to both academic and non-academic audiences. I always say, and I'm sure you've heard this before, you need to be able to explain what it is you are studying to the person sitting next to you on the plane. And don't tell me that the person sitting next to you on the plane is your research supervisor. I think you understand that I'm talking about being able to explain it to a stranger in an elevator to a child, to an elderly person, to somebody who's completely outside of the context. And not only for them to understand it, but also for them to be convinced that what you are doing is important and that it makes sense. So that's a challenge, and it's a challenge I'm still learning how to address. So that statement that I've just made, when you find out how to do that consistently, please do share it with me and with your colleagues. So making sound judgments and communicating. That was number 3. Let's get to number 4. You have to demonstrate self-direction and originality. And I want to really emphasize this, right? When you are doing a master's degree by research, some people will do a master's degree by coursework, but you still have the thesis component. It is a shift from guided learning to independent scholarship, right? And you are expected to chart your own course. You must identify the gaps in the literature. You must design your study. You must set realistic but also ambitious timelines, because we don't want to take forever to do these projects. We want to get them done and dusted in the minimum required time, and also while they are still topical and timely. Originality doesn't really mean inventing something entirely new in this context. It can mean applying existing frameworks in new contexts, offering fresh interpretations, or integrating cross-disciplinary insights, right? So don't think about it as making a brand new discovery. That's really not what we're trying to do. We're trying to innovate. We're trying to work within the existing paradigms and frameworks, but to do that work differently, to do that work creatively. And then finally, diverse research outputs. It's important that research outputs at this level can take multiple forms, right? Depending on the discipline that you're working in, and in consultation with your supervisor, always. Technical reports, creative performances, peer-reviewed journal articles, or other research equivalent submissions are all important. This flexibility encourages researchers to align their output with the form most appropriate for their field and for the communities that you are serving. So, I mean, I know diverse research outputs such as creative output, some people producing plays, producing plays, producing films, creating patents, and other kinds of inventions. There's a whole range for you to think of. Now, that was the key competencies at NQF level 9. I'm going to go to the key competencies at NQ level F, at NQF level 10. And then I'm going to shoot to the chat and see if and have a look at what your responses were, and see if we can engage in a little conversation before we move on. Now, key competencies at NQF level 10. This is why it's important for us to see the building blocks of what comprises advanced research degrees. And we know that the PhD, the doctorate degree, is the absolute pinnacle, and it's the last NQF level for a reason. So now we move from NQF level 9 to level 10. This is the pinnacle of academic qualifications. Level 9 equips you to critically engage and apply theory in complex contexts, right? But what level 10 is asking you to do, it's asking you for something more. And it invites you to create knowledge, to move out of the field of consumption, really to the field of production. It signals not just that you have or you are developing advanced expertise, but also it shows academic maturity, scholarly independence, and leadership. Okay, so let's just go through the criteria that I've summarized over here for you. So, number 1, advanced research and the doctoral thesis. At this level, research is no longer simply a task, right? It's a vocation. You don't spend 3 to 5 years working on a PhD because you want to be called doctor at the end of the day. That's okay. You should. If you get that PhD and you want to be called doctor, you should be called doctor. But that's not going to be enough to keep you up at night That's not enough to justify the sacrifices that you will make to do this research, the time away from your family, loss of, or not loss of income, I hope not loss of income, but, you know, some people do have to take leave from work in order to do their research, and just the time and the difficulty that comes along with it. I'm not trying to put you off. I am just trying to make it very clear to you that what you are doing is quite exceptional. So don't take that for granted, right? So the doctoral thesis is your primary contribution to the academy, right? It's your primary contribution. It's your first contribution as well. It's not just an expanded version of your master's thesis. Like your master's thesis is not an expanded version of your honors. Your PhD is showing something quite different, right? It needs to demonstrate your ability to pose and to answer questions that have never been answered before. Questions that move the conversation forward, that advances the conversation in the field that you are working. Now, this can take the form of a monograph, right? That's putting you together your thesis in a kind of sequential manner, but it can also be a body of peer-reviewed articles. In some disciplines, people produce digital archives. Some do creative pieces like documentary films, novels, exhibitions. But what happens here is we start to see that what's happened in level 9, the skills that you have acquired in level 9, you really you level up on them, right? And you are now starting to not just, I suppose, push the boundaries, you are also expanding the boundaries, right? So for people who are working in, I think this is important, if you are working in practice-based or community-based research, there might be a variety of ways to show that your doctoral output, and this is something you need to consider very closely with your supervisor, but that your doctoral output can also contribute. It meets the scholarly criteria, but it can also meet the specific need of a community. And this is really where form and function need to come together, right? And again, your supervisor is going to be the person who can advise you the best in this. But what I'm trying to show you, or what I'm trying to say to you, is that we expect you to expand the boundaries. Into your master's level, you're pushing the boundaries. At your PhD, we're expecting you to expand the boundaries. So if the traditional written format of a thesis is not the only aspect of research that you feel is important for the topic and the questions that you are asking, then you can have that conversation with your supervisor, and together you can figure out creative ways to bring this work together. And if there are supervisors who really don't like this idea, I sincerely apologize to you. It is just the kind of creativity that I see. I see that the academy and all of its stakeholders are really excited about, and the kind of creativity that really pushes us forward as the human race, I suppose. So you now need to also show, number 3 is high level capability and originality. Again, I'm going to pause on this word originality. So at level 9, you saw the importance of engaging critically with existing knowledge. And level 10, you are expected to produce original insights. Insights that expand the frontiers, again, expand the frontiers of your field, of your discipline and of knowledge. So this might mean that you develop a new theoretical model, you apply an existing framework to a previously unstudied context. This is where your ability to do research really shines, because you cannot say that something's been unstudied and then we find a random article or random study that you missed maybe from 50 years ago. but we can also talk more about that. It can challenge dominant paradigms, especially in fields shaped by colonial or Eurocentric foundations. We know that our institutions have a commitment to decolonizing education and decolonizing various fields that have been predominantly shaped by Eurocentric epistemologies and ontologies and basically ways of doing and phenomenological approaches as well, ways of doing scholarship. Now, originality doesn't mean doing something that no one has ever done before, but it does mean contributing something new, something meaningful, and something contextually relevant. So in a South African or in a broader African context, that could mean decolonizing a field, centering indigenous epistemologies, or proposing global South alternative to global North norms. Think of the frustration when you are doing research and you want to do research on a topic, but all you can do is find articles that are on context outside of the African context, right? Now that becomes that frustration can underpin a really important research question that you might be able to answer through a extended or an advanced research degree. But you're not just engaging the field when you get to level 10, you are shaping, you are reshaping it. That is super important work. Now, also we see that this is point 4, is that at this level, we can see that at level 10, you can either be deeply disciplinary, so you go deep into your discipline and you really grapple with its foundations and with its futures, or you can be boldly interdisciplinary. Some people work within the concept of transdisciplinarity as well, but some of the most exciting research today lives at these intersections, right? Think of it, I'll think of my own field, like there's I work at the intersection of religion and media. Some really exciting work is coming out of law and gender, public health and indigenous knowledge. These are hybrid spaces that allow us to pose richer and more complex questions. And this is, I'm going to link this later on to Eunice's catalytic niche areas and also the SDGs as well. So whether you are embedded in your discipline or you are bridging multiple ones, what matters the most is that your work shows clarity, that it shows coherence, and that it also shows, and that it also is a contribution, right? An important contribution that drives the conversation forward, that extends it, that expands it, and also hopefully changes it to highlight gaps and things that might have been missing, oversights, exclusions, and such. Now, number 5, and this is probably my favorite here. At the NQF level 10, you are also learning about supervising and evaluating others. You become a scholarly peer. And this is really where the shift becomes most profound. You are not only expected to produce original research, you are also now a peer in the academic community. In many contexts, people who are working on their PhDs work in the academy. They teach, they can supervise, they can mentor, they can examine, they can act as reviewers, and they contribute to the growth of knowledge through others, right? So this is not just about authority because you have the knowledge, you have the skills to do it. It's also about your academic and your social responsibility. So I think in level 9, I emphasize that students learn to be self-directed, right? At the master's level. At level 10, you become the guide. You are learning to become the guide. So if we want to transform the academy, especially academies that are still, especially in South Africa, where our academies are still marked by vast inequalities, and our society is still marked by vast inequalities, this role of the guide, right, the supervisor, and I'm using that, also within the mentorship capacity, it takes on an added significance. You're helping to shape the future and to make the academy and our society more inclusive, more just, and I suppose also more resident with the needs of the communities that we serve. So now I hope that you understand the expectations of doctoral research at level 10. It's demanding originality, it wants relevance and contribution to society. And we're going to move on to the catalytic niche areas very soon. But before we do that, I'm just going to switch over and I'm going to check the Q&A to see if we got any comment, or the chat to see if anybody introduced themselves. Okay. All right. Well, I don't see anything in the chat. If you do have any comments or questions at this stage, please do pose them. I'm eager to answer your questions. I'll give you a minute or so. Questions, comments. Okay. Another 30 seconds. Okay. Let's get back to it. So these slides will be available. They will be available in the folder after the lecture. I'm not going to be reading what's written there, neither do you. You can read it in your own time. But doctoral work, master's work as well, but doctoral work doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It has to respond to the world around us, to the crises that we are undergoing, to the possibilities that exist, and to how rapidly shifting the frontiers of knowledge and need are, right? So this is where UNISA's catalytic niche areas come in. And you can obviously go to the website for a much more in-depth understanding reading of this. But UNISA has identified 10 high-impact future-oriented areas that are academically rich for exploration, but they're also socially urgent. And I think what is really interesting about these catalytic niche areas is that they also are strategically aligned, and they align strategically with the Sustainable Development Goals, the African Union's Agenda 2063, and also the South African National Development Plan. So as we move into this section of my presentation this evening, I want you to think, how might your work align with one of these areas, right, in the catalytic niche areas? But also, how can your doctoral, your master's contribution plug into a larger kind of ecosystem of change? And that's where you can consider the SDGs as well, right? And how do these spaces, these catalytic niche areas, how do they encourage us to push and to think beyond our disciplines, within, but also beyond our disciplines? How is it pushing us to think in transformative ways? So how might your work align with these areas from the catalytic niche areas? How, I suppose, you know, how can it plug into a larger ecosystem of change? And I think that we can really consider through the SDGs. I think that's an important guide, although limited and open to critique. And then, yeah, how do these how do these niche areas, the SDGs, how does it invite us to go deep within our disciplines, but also to think transformatively? If you would like to share in the chat or to pose it as a Q&A, what your ideas around this might be, then please do so. I would be excited to know what your thoughts are. But briefly, the catalytic niche areas divided into, there are 10, and we can consider them through science, technology, and innovation. As you can see, it's marine studies, aviation, aeronautical studies, automotive studies, energy studies, space studies, fourth industrial revolution, and digitalization. And then there are the niche areas that are, we think through in terms of health, society, and inclusivity, biotechnological studies, health and pharmaceutical studies, feminist, womanist, and Bosadi theorizations, a really important and understudied academic area, student support, and co-curricular development, right? So these are the catalytic niche areas. Think about where your work is positioned. Think about the intersections, the transdisciplinary or the interdisciplinary transections that your work might encounter through this. Yeah, think through that as you are developing your proposal, but also as we are as we are gathered here this evening. This is just a slide of the SDGs. If you consider the catalytic niche areas and you consider the work that would take place if we prioritize, as Eunice is doing, if we prioritize those areas, how does that fit into the SDG goals around no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality? There are 17 there's 17 SDGs, and yeah, how do they plug in and how do they enfold each other? They don't happen in isolation. They don't take place in isolation, and one need does not cancel out or subsume another. These are all interrelated. So think about this. This might be where the creativity or the originality of your work can be situated or located. Okay, and again, if you would like to share, in the chat, then please do so. I'd be very eager to know what you are thinking. So let's get to the research proposal. This is a bit of a recap. I know that you had a full session on this yesterday, but I also just wanted to give you some feedback on, or I wanted to give you, to talk through the research proposal again, just quite briefly. I've also been asked to inform you that the research proposal form is also in the folder. So please do visit that. It's already been placed there. And yeah, it's quite comprehensive. I would take the time to really sit with it and to study it. Because it is the guide, it's the best guidance document for you it's the best guidance document for putting together your proposal. What this session tonight is really about is really breaking down, breaking that down further, right? And breaking that down further, and also giving you kinds of different ways of thinking that are not just instrumentalist, but also are not just instrumentalists, but are also there to inspire you to think creatively about the contribution that your work is going to be making, right? It also is about giving you those tools so that you can refine your work to an extent that it can really be coherent and that it can make the contribution that we hope that it will. So let's go to it, or let's get to it. What is a research proposal? So it's not just a requirement of the university, even though it is a really important requirement, but it's a blueprint, it's a plan for your work, right? It's a structured document that tells us what outlines what you intend to research, why it matters, and how you're going to do it. And also what you hope the outcomes will be. Remember, a research proposal is written before you do the work. That's really important. So to some extent, you can be deterministic or you can predetermine in some ways, but you also have to leave a level of openness and flexibility to say that, you know, this is what I'm thinking about, this is my hypothesis, but I need to go and test this. Whether I'm testing it in the lab or I'm testing it in the field, this is the hunch that I have. And that hunch must be underpinned by rigorous scholarly research, right, in terms of literature review, and conceptualizing the parts of your proposal. But really, it is just about what do you expect? What would you like to do? So also this proposal is your first major, this is the first major thing you will author, you will write as an academic. And I'm saying this to master's students as well, right? Like, see it as such. It's not just something that needs to be done. It's something that shows what you are able to do already. A good proposal can get you really, really far. Yeah, this is the first time you're going to put your name to an idea and you're going to say, I think that this question that I'm asking, I don't have the answer to it, but I think that this is a question that is worthy of being asked. And the problem that this question is addressing, I believe that it needs attention. And I think that I'm the one who can do this work, who can pose the question, address the problem, and hopefully come up with not the solution, but solutions, new ways of thinking about this, possibilities. Okay, think of this. I think of the research proposal as a space where you think about how things are, whatever that might mean for your field, for your discipline, and how you imagine it could be. What are the possibilities? So a research problem, the best research problems are inspired by or addressing real problems. And I think that's really important as we've spoken about that, right? So what is a research proposal? Now, the structure of a research, the core components of a research, of a good proposal should answer a few questions, right? And I've got the research structure over here. There you go, structure of a research proposal. But before we get to this as a more technical thing, core components, the structure, but also your strategy, what you're trying to do within the research proposal. So a strong proposal contains key questions, right? It addresses a few key questions. So the first question I think would be, what is the problem? What gap in knowledge are you trying or are you addressing? What issue is unresolved? Why is it important? That's number 2. What is at stake if this problem remains unexamined? Why now? Why here? Why in this context do we have to do it? Number 3, what does the literature have to say? Right? Have other scholars or how have other scholars approached this question and what's missing or overlooked, right? What is the conceptual? Number 4, what is the conceptual or theoretical lens? How will you make sense of this topic that you're going to choose to address? What ideas will guide your interpretation? How will you conduct the study? This is about your methodology here, right? What methods will you use? Interviews, archival research, lab experiments, documentary, ethnography, and then also, very, very importantly, point 6 here is what ethical considerations apply, right? Have you considered impact, harm, consent, positionality? Those are really important things. Your ethics as a researcher has the ability to make or break your study. What are the anticipated challenges and limitations? These, unfortunately, are things that you have to project. But in projecting what problems or what challenges or limitations you might face, you also need to try to find mitigating circumstances for those. What are things that you can do to make this, to lessen the impact of challenges and limitations? And then number 8, what will your research contribute? What does it contribute to the field? Does it have application to the community, to policy, to practice, to epistemology? Now, this is not a checklist that I'm trying to give you, right? It's a map of how you move from a research idea to a scholarly journey. These are the kinds of questions, these are the kinds of issues that you must think through, that you must grapple with, right? Now, for master students, the proposal is usually focused on demonstrating, I would say demonstrating competence, right? Your ability to design and manage a research project, right? That's choosing your questions, working out what the problem is, your methodology, all of those things. Your goal as a master student is to show how you can work within existing literature, how you can apply appropriate methods and produce a coherent critical piece of research within a defined time frame. So this doesn't mean that it might sound like a more modest contribution, but it's not. It needs to be very clear. It needs to be very strategic. Maybe you are going to apply a known theory in a new context, or explore an under-researched community, or test a small-scale intervention. That's still very valuable work. But here you are showing your ability to do that work. Now, for PhD students, the stakes are higher, right? You don't just need to demonstrate originality. You don't just need to demonstrate competence. You must demonstrate originality, rigor, ambition. You're not just joining the conversation. You're not a guest here in the house. You're expected to shift it. So your research needs to identify a real gap in knowledge, offer a compelling rationale for why that gap matters, and you must propose a methodologically sound way to address it. And you have to anticipate your scholarly contribution. What in your field, in your discipline, in your community, in your world is going to be different because you did this work? And what new theories, what new methods or understanding is going to emerge? So those are some of the really important considerations for you to think through. Like I said, the proposal is going to be the research proposal form is available already, so it is there. And I know that yesterday you spent quite a bit of time going through the very practical elements of the research proposal. So please do take the time to look at that form and to study it quite closely. I'm going to check the chat now. Please, any questions, any comments are most welcome. I'm just going to switch over and check that. I'm just waiting for it to load. All right. Oh gosh, sorry, I didn't check this Yes, thank you. I didn't check this properly. Let's have a look. So I'm going to just start from the beginning. When I asked the first and initial question was about what you would like to what you'd like to gain from the session today, and then also how you're feeling about your research. So some of the responses that we got were soft skills. I think that soft skills is definitely something that you will be able to take away from this. Also, I think I hope that you leave here feeling confident that you can think about your project not just as something that you need to get done, but really as something that is an important contribution that you are making to not only the academy, but also to the world at large. And then overcoming anxiety, absolutely. Sometimes just being in spaces like this is enough to really just get you to feel like you are doing more than you might be able to do. And you might be more than you might be able to do for whatever reason. Maybe you are really busy at work or busy with your family, and this is the only time you have to think about your thesis or your dissertation. So I hope that can give you some peace around the fact that you actually are making progress. Daunted, but as excited to begin this journey. I think that's absolutely, yeah, that's great. You should be daunted, and I'm not saying that in any facetious way. I'm only saying it because all of you, all 69, I'm so sorry. It seems like we're losing an audience here, but it's also supper time, I suppose. But all of you are doing, I mean, this is not easy stuff. Doing a master's is not an easy thing. A PhD is not an easy thing. If it was, everybody would be doing it. It is really difficult work, and yeah, so Rudy, thank you for Rudy said that they're looking for information, so feeling a bit lost. Yeah, Rudy, I'm not sure where in the process you are, but feeling lost is often a good place to start, because it means that you know that you need a map, and I hope that this can contribute to you finding your map. My expectation is to be guided through the proposal development process. Thank you. So the number of pages per section of the master's proposal, I would actually like for you to check that on the proposal form. I don't want to give you the wrong information. It is on the proposal form. And I honestly need a bit of clarity just for myself so I can move forward with my proposal. Feeling overwhelmed at the moment, full-time job and doing a PhD is no joke, I'm gathering. Nosipo, yeah. Yep. That's what it is, right? It really is no joke. I feel for you, and thank you for being in the space. And then let's see, I expect understanding, knowing what I'm doing, because right now I feel lost. I hear you. So please, anxious, inspired. What makes research significant, and how do you identify a research gap? Thank you so much for that question, Sylvia. What makes research significant, and how do you identify a research gap? There are a few ways for you to do so, depending on the field that you are in. So firstly, you can start with the literature, right? Read through the literature that defines your field, and then you can ask yourself, what is not being said? Who's not being studied? Or who is not even doing the studying, right? What are important points that you, and this is for a master's or PhD student, what are important points that you expect to see in the literature but simply are not there, right? And then ask yourself, why is it not there? What makes research significant? I mean, if we look at the, and this is a very practical way for you to do it, right? Look at what UNISA, for instance, identified as catalytic niche areas, really important areas of human life, of our existence that need attention, right? And then think through, where can your work fit into that? Or how does your work respond to that? The SDGs, I have been very critical of the SDGs, and I believe we must always be critical of all systems, all frameworks, all structured, but we must be constructively critical. The SDGs also offer us sorry, I'm just going to go to them. These are things that world leaders have gotten together, right? And have identified as issues that need our sustained attention if we are to continue to flourish as not the right word, but as a species. So I'm sorry, Sylvia, that I'm not giving you one answer, but I hope that this will give you the courage for you to figure that out, right? And for you to assert that this is whatever topic it is that you are choosing to do, for you to say this is a significant topic, and you know what, this significant topic needs attention for the following reasons. And you can either do that through the research or through the literature, or you can do that through the real problem, right? And then you can take the real problem and you can translate it into a research problem. Anonymous, it's simply not possible for you to be a master's student with no supervisor and not lose time. You must have a supervisor in order to do a project such as a master's or PhD, even an honors project, you have a supervisor. So, so I would, I would recommend reaching out to. I will ask one of our administrators working, but you should reach out to the office who organizes these workshops. I'll try to get a contact for you so that you can discuss that, because that is quite alarming and urgent. Another anonymous, thank you so much. It is always essential to situate the research within the CNAs to enable the customer value maximization agenda of the research in enabling the developmental state. Yeah, that you're using language there that I must say is a little bit far from my social scientific mind, but thank you so much for sharing that. And then Fiona, I hope to get out of this session confidence, which I'm slowly getting with every session. So thank you. This is my first session, so I hope that my first session with you. So I hope that I can contribute to the confidence that you are getting. And I think it's wonderful. It's a very natural process. The more you know, the more you also, the more you learn, the more you know, and then you also begin to understand what the gaps in your knowledge are and what your weaknesses are, and then you're able to address those. So thank you for that. That was actually I really enjoyed engaging your comments. Please do keep them coming, your comments and your questions. Now, before we move on, I also oopsie, sorry about that. So before we move on to tips for your proposal defense, I want to speak a little bit about the deeper meaning of research and of research proposal development, right? And I think what I'd like to share in this regard is research is a practice of hope, right? And this is going again, we start within the academy, within the university, but this goes beyond the university, right? So what I'm saying is that your research proposal, this work that you are doing, it really does say that you believe, and you want us to believe, that it's possible for us to understand more, to improve the systems that are existing today, and to give voice and to challenge injustices and to imagine the world in transformative ways, right? And I think that in South Africa, this is a very important, and across the continent as well, but I think that it's a really important thing that we need to do, because we really do need research that speaks to our realities, to the inequalities that we see, to violence, to ecological devastation, planetary injustice, I don't know, digital divides, and also the unfinished business of decolonization. So research is really a space, and it's a tool for us to do this kind of reparative work, and also to uplift and to heal and to connect as human beings with our earth and with ourselves and with each other. So I think whatever the field that you are in, whether you are in STEM or in the humanities, public health, law, theology, the proposal is where you begin to align your intellectual journey, right? Like what it is you know and you've learned and what you will learn through the study. But you connect that and you align that intellectual journey with your ethical commitments. So these are questions for you to ask yourselves as individuals and as individual researchers. What work is worth you doing your time, your energy, and your labor, right? Whose lives are going to be touched by this work that you do? And what kind of researcher do you want to become? Because this is not just about a certificate at the end of the day. Because if it was just about a certificate at the end of the day, I think that that would be very, very empty. And I'd like to believe that there's far more meaning. So I'm challenging you and I'm asking you to think about your research as a practice of hope. And that's hope in the idea that we can understand more, that we can improve systems, and that we can challenge injustices and imagine worlds that are more just and inclusive and safe. Okay, so now let's go through tips for your proposal defense. Yeah, so you will need to defend your proposal, and it's usually a presentation that lasts about 20 to 30 minutes. So you need to keep your content really focused. Don't read your slides. I said don't just read your slides, but really I wanted to be a bit stronger. They don't read your slides. Talk through them and add explanations where needed. And the explanation should really be that extra information that you feel will really explain to your listener. We'll explain to them the kind of insider knowledge that just reading won't offer, right? Remember that you will have individuals in the room who might not understand your topic particularly. Our disciplines are very diverse. I think I mentioned to you, I'm a scholar of religion. Very rarely do I understand what's happening in the room when, for instance, let me give you an example. My dear colleagues who are systematic theologians or biblical scholars, when they are speaking, even though we're in the same discipline, their topics are so different to mine that I often need more translation. And in this, sorry, I think I might just have no, I've got the right slide. So so really make sure that you are speaking in accessible ways. I think I've also mentioned that a lot of my work is in digital media and digital religion studies. And often I have to tell my master's and PhD students, particularly those who are quite a bit younger than the rest of the scholars in the world, also to not alienate their audiences, because they assume that the knowledge they have of the digital world and digital spaces, they assume that it is common knowledge for everyone else. So they use language and jargon that is really hard for everybody to connect to, because, as much as the social media feels pervasive, it isn't actually that way for everybody. So just, these kinds of tips, I hope can be helpful. But again, this is not, they call it a proposal defense. It's not about being defensive, really. I suppose the language there is a little bit militant, but it is for you to justify your research choices. And then be open to receiving feedback that might lead you to believe that the choices that you have made can be tweaked a little bit, right? You do need to be quite practical in this, so you can design your slideshow. I would say no more than 17 to 20 slides in total. Master students, you can think about 15 slides should be okay, maybe even a little bit less, but keep each slide short and clear. Aim for 1 to 7 sentences per slide, right? Whatever extra notes you have, you can, you add in the notes section, but not on the slide itself. So easy to read fonts, the layout should be clean, try to avoid clutter, and to maintain focus and readability. Now, I would say less is more, to have less on your slides so that people can listen to you more, right? So they can really give you their full attention and just use the slides as kind of placeholders and markers. Okay, so this, yeah, so these really are just guidelines that I think you might find useful. So you must have a title slide where you include your research title, name, your department. You must have your problem statement, clearly state the issue that your research will address, the purpose of your study, the significance of your study, right? This should be part 1. Part 2, you then need a slide that speaks to your research questions or your hypotheses. You should give two slides at least, I think, to literature review. The colleague who asked earlier about how do you know what the gap in the study is or where the gap of the study is, it's really you should be able to find it in the literature. If you're not finding it in the real world, even when you do find it in the so-called real world, the literature is really the place where you go. And at a master's level and at a PhD level, you must, at both levels, you have to show that you have intimate knowledge and command of the literature. And so take your time really with that. Then the theoretical and the conceptual framework, the research design, and when you are talking to your research design, you also want to talk through the sample and the population, your data collection methods, data analysis techniques. Something else that I think is really important for you to consider is the limitations. Briefly mention possible challenges or constraints in your study and how you plan to manage them. We've mentioned this very briefly earlier. It doesn't matter if there's a limitation. You just need to flag the limitation, show that you know there's a limitation, and then you need to show us how you will manage that. If you cannot manage it, then it is a limitation that affects the feasibility of your study, and then you have to go back to the drawing board. You must also define the scope of your research. What are you focusing on and what is intentionally excluded? Because you can't do everything. You absolutely cannot do everything. And you shouldn't be doing everything with a thesis. It's a thesis. It's important work, but it is also just a thesis. So it needs to be focused. It needs to be clear. So only list, you then do need to show your references. That just shows also, again, your skill. And it is one of the courtesies that we afford as academics, especially when we are speaking to our specific research topics. You cite your references, and then you have a thank you slide where you ask for questions and you invite feedback. Okay, so that is your proposal defense for all masters and PhD students. So I think before we finish off this section, because the next section that we want to get to is actually going to be looking at the actual thesis, what a thesis is. But your first draft of your proposal is not going to be perfect, right? And it's not supposed to be. No one is expecting that. I think what matters the most, and this is to all of you are feeling lost, all of you are feeling anxious. What matters most is that you start. One of my mentors says you must write badly and you must revise bravely, right? You must speak to your supervisors, to your peers, to the people around you, right? But you must start. The blank page is, I think, one of the most scariest things, or the blank screen is one of the scariest things. So even if you write badly, remember that you aren't tattooing this on your body. You can delete it, you can shift it, you can change it. I know that it's difficult. I have been through it myself, and I supervise a number of students. And so I'm very, very much acutely aware of how difficult the process is. But even if you start by writing 100 words a day or 200 words a day, just put something on paper. Okay, so yeah, I think that my encouragement here, just on your research proposal, is that the questions that you're asking matter. And the research that you're doing and this proposal that you're doing is the beginning of something bigger than just a degree. You are entering into the world as a participant in building a better future for all of us. And that doesn't mean that your thesis is going to inform policy. It doesn't mean that your thesis is going to change law, or everybody's going to develop patents and cures and those kinds of things. But if it gets us to start thinking differently, right? If it gets us to imagine alternative possibilities that make the world a better place, if it highlights an injustice that we have taken for granted, that is building a better future. So thank you for that. That's sorry, I'm not ending. I'm just saying that's our section on research proposal. And yeah, so please just start, right? Don't let the page stay blank. Now, for the next section, the next section we're going to get to is, what is a thesis? So we know what a proposal is. It's a blueprint, it's a map. It's also a promise to, it is a promise to your supervisor and to your defense committee that this is the work that you plan to do and how you plan to do it. So let's talk a little bit about what is a thesis. Now, depending on where you are in your journey, it might sound intimidating or even abstract or maybe even exciting. The thesis is not just a document, but it's a process. It's something that you are going to do and that you will be doing. It's something that you do, right? So it's a process. You are in the process of writing a thesis. You are practicing, right? When you are writing, you are practicing the art of thesising. But it's also, this thesis is your academic contribution. It is your intellectual voice and your contribution to knowledge. And I think that in both master's and PhD studies, the thesis is the proof that you can do research, right? That you can not only consume knowledge, as in read and understand and do that, but you can also create knowledge. You can also produce knowledge. Now, the master's thesis is really about deepening the field, right? At this level, you are demonstrating your ability to engage deeply with an area of study. You must show that you can formulate a clear research question, apply appropriate methods, and produce a focused, coherent argument or investigation. Now, again, I want to encourage you to go to the proposal document, which also gives you the guidelines specifically for the number of pages for how long a thesis or dissertation should be. Again, you must check with your supervisors for the discipline as well, but it's usually about 80 to 100 pages, somewhere between 40 or 35 and 50,000 words. Please check with your supervisors, but the upper limit for a master's thesis is 50,000 words. And this thesis is really the place where you flex, where you show that you understand how to do research, that you can follow through, that you can write, and that you can think at a postgraduate or at an advanced research level. So, master students, I think that maybe some of your anxiety can be allayed, because a master's thesis doesn't need to be groundbreaking. But what it must be is it must be solid, it must be critical, and it must be well argued. Now, I think maybe I'll give you just a few ideas of like what a master's thesis might explore. So it could maybe be a gap in policy. It could be a case study of a local community, so something that's quite micro in its study. You might want to do that. It could be comparative, like looking at two different approaches to a particular topic. Or you can do a very close, deep, thick reading of a key text in your field of study or a trend. But this is your training ground. So consider it as such. I was thinking about this the other day. And again, I want to stay with this metaphor of moving between being a consumer of knowledge and becoming a producer of knowledge. But think of the master's thesis as a doorway. Once you walk through it, you're not just a learner anymore, or you're not just a student. You are a creator, right? You are a contributor. You are participating in the conversation. You are entering into the scholarly conversation, and when you're done with your master's, you should be very well able to participate in that scholarly conversation. Now, like I said, the master's thesis, let's think about it as deepening the field. But the PhD thesis, let's think about it as a space where we are creating new knowledge. And like I said earlier, your PhD is not just a bigger version of your master's. The PhD is substantively different. It's functionally different. And it's here where the bar really rises. At this level, you are expected not to just engage with knowledge, but you have to extend it. It must be an original contribution, but it doesn't mean that you are reinventing everything. It means that you're offering something that the field did not have before you entered into it. So something I often say to my students is you don't need to be the best at what you do. We all want to be the best at what we do. You don't have to be the best scholar of history but you need to be the only person who is doing the work the way that you are doing it. You have to have a niche, right? Something that you contribute, whether that is a theory or method, whether that is a lens, an analytical lens, where you're saying like, let's look at biotechnology, but let's look at biotechnology from the framing of, I don't know, arts and culture, right? And being able to justify that and being able to show us the feasibility of those kinds of connections. That is the kind of work that we are looking for, right? So that original contribution also speaks to creativity. So if I could just maybe give you a few examples. So it could look like developing a whole new theoretical model. It could be about using an innovative methodology to study something. It can be like a really deep analysis of an under-researched issue. So, and again, this is what happens when you're finding the gap, like, when you're doing the reading, or you're looking at real world problems and you're saying, why is nobody studying this, right? Like that is contributing, that is creative. And this is one of my favorite things, I often say this is, or sometimes you need to apply old questions in new contexts. And I'll leave that for you to think about. What does it look like if you ask an old question in a new context, right? What is an old question in your discipline? And what is a new context to which you can apply it? So I think PhDs in terms of, and again, please check this with your supervisors, I think maybe usually 200 to 300 pages. Generally, there's an upper word limit of 80,000 words, although that varies across disciplines. It is a process that spans over several years. It's not because at the end of it, it's not just that you produce the PhD. Getting the PhD tells the world that you are an independent scholar, right? And this is what it's meant historically, that you are capable of supervising others, right? With some training, we all need training constantly, but that you can supervise, that you can publish, and that you can participate in academic events. So it's not just, it's about you will come out of your PhD different. You will come out of it different to what you've started. So yeah, I think that your PhD says to the world, here's something that you didn't know, and also here's why it matters, right? You tell us the problem, you tell us the solution, and that's a very that's a very blunt way to say it. Obviously, there's not just one solution, but it really is about finding the problem, seeing the problem, calling it out, affirming it for us, and then telling us why it matters. Why do we need to give it attention, right? So that is what the PhD really, that's what the PhD thesis is about. Now, very practically, and I won't be spending too much time on this, what's inside a thesis, right? Depending on whether you are going to be producing your thesis as a monograph, that is one extended body of work, whether you're going to be using the article format or structure. Again, this is something that you have to discuss with your supervisor. They will be able to advise you, but you will have an introductory chapter. You must have a literature review. Literature review is extremely important. Remember, you are showing that you are part of a scholarly community. You are independent, but you don't work in isolation, right? You will have a theoretical conceptual framework chapter. You will then have to speak through to your methodology, findings and analysis, right? That's also always something that you probably the most important aspect, right? Because you told us that you told us what we needed to pay attention to. You told us what we didn't know. You told us why it mattered, and now you need to tell us what you found, right? Then putting your findings, telling us what they mean, giving us that direction, and also how it relates to broader debates. And then in your conclusion, you must tell us what your contributions are. Your contributions are, what the limitations of the study are, or the limitations of the study, what they are, because at the end of the project, you know how you were limited, not just projecting it. And then you also explain to us areas for future research. What I like about the aspect of of areas for future research is that I think it's a good way to create space for yourself, because if you finish your PhD, one of the most natural steps is for you to do a postdoctoral fellowship. And to show that continuity, but to also show how you can use your postdoctoral fellowship to expand on some of the limitations or the areas for future research of your PhD, I think is a very interesting and industrious way of expanding the research, and also ensuring that you continue on in the academy and contribute in that way. Now, before we move to the next section, I am going to go back to the chat and see if we have any new comments that we can address. How can you help me to balance my work time, employment time with my demanding PhD studies, as I am how can you help me to balance my work time, employment time with my demanding PhD studies, as I am very busy during the day in order to meet my work deadlines? Okay. So I believe that they are actually going to be sessions that that will allow students to ask exactly these kinds of questions, because I really do think that it's extremely important, but it's also not something that we're able to answer, like, in a really short manner. I think that it's important for us to spend time thinking through it, which we can't do now. But I know that people have got different mechanisms for working and coping. So I hope that you will attend one of those open sessions so you can pose this question and maybe listen to other colleagues, to hear what it is that they are doing. I have to say that I always tell the story, but I wrote my PhD 500 words at a time. In the first year or two, I would just commit every day to writing at least 500 words. It's not a lot, because if you heard earlier, I said about 80,000 words if you want. Sometimes I did more, sometimes I did less, but I committed to writing every day. So maybe giving yourself, starting very small and modestly and saying 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day on the weekends. But I'm sorry, Anonymous, I'm not able to answer that coherently here in this space, but I didn't just want to leave it. But please do try and attend one of the sessions where we address this, okay? What is the best way to address a non-responsive supervisor while maintaining a positive and professional relationship? Anonymous, we'd have to know more in that context, but I would recommend that you speak to your dean, and I think that would be the best way, to speak to your dean in confidence, or the dean of your faculty in confidence, and to seek their advice. There are often many circumstances. Yeah. Good evening. How different is the Viva to a conference presentation? I'm going to speak about that a little bit. Somebody said proposal defense. Yes, your proposal defense is usually an internal thing that happens within your faculty or within your department. Your supervisor will let you know after you've submitted your proposal to the supervisor when that takes place. It is usually a formality, and it is literally something that is there and it is literally something that is there to support you in your process. You must remember that at the level of proposal, nobody's trying to catch you out. Nobody's trying to show you up. It really is about helping you to build the best possible study that you can. Where can we list IRB letter, ethical research letter, and others? That must be added as addendum. That is an addendum to your proposal, and it is an addendum to your thesis as well. But what you must do is you must state that you have attained the necessary ethics for this. So those are the practical elements of the ethics, those IRB letters, the ethical research letters, and those kinds of stuff. In your proposal and in your thesis, you discuss the discursive elements, right? The debates and the issues around ethics, not just the practical things. The practical things, you put that in your addendum. Thank you, Jessica. I think that the degree is far bigger than, the project is far bigger than a certificate or a degree. The fact that you are doing this work is, like I said, I know it's not easy. I've been there myself, but I also know based on my experience that the work is actually really important. So let's get back to it. And I'm going to end with the Viva thing, the Viva part of it this evening. So I will get to the question that was posed over there. Sorry about that. But before we do, before we get to the, excuse me, to the Viva, I think I again just want to reflect. Earlier, we were talking about research, I suppose, as or your research proposal as an act of hope, right? About shifting and changing society, about the contribution that you're making. But I also then just want to emphasize, and again, this for me is transdisciplinary, right? It goes whatever you are studying, like this is important. And as emerging academics, and I consider all of you emerging academics, I think I want to really urge you to perhaps take on this philosophy, or at least to consider it. Research is also a responsibility. It's not just this academic checklist that we go through, and especially here on the continent, like a thesis can be a tool for transformation, right? I've seen it myself. I've seen how theses have become spaces where injustices have been called out, where injustices have been called out, where policy changes have been inspired, where laws have even come to be changed, or at least be informed by that. Just very recently, a scholar who was doing work in forensic linguistics, and I know in her work she had studied emojis quite extensively, and for a long time nobody understood what she was doing, right? Because it was so new, and it was just the other day she became an expert witness in court, and her research informed that. And what she was doing was she was doing the interpretation of emojis, and you can Google this later if you want to, but she was of emojis and emoticons within the context of evidence that was presented through WhatsApp and social media. That was, I mean, that really is about research making a difference in the social world. So ask yourself when you're doing this work, right? You ask yourself, who is heard in your thesis? Whose knowledge is centered or silenced? Does your research reproduce hierarchies, or does it challenge them? And I think that if you come from the point of view that your research is a responsibility, but also as you build the confidence to understand that your research matters deeply, you will automatically, or you will, sorry, not automatically, you will intentionally find ways for your research to address inequality, historical injustices, and also uplift or amplify marginalized voices. So I think if I think of the research proposal as like, you know, as a document that really is about, as a practice of hope, right, of the possibilities that can change, I think that the thesis is almost as, the thesis is like the treaty that's offering us that really concrete guidance. Now the Viva. I was very the university of that I'm a part of doesn't actually have that I'm formally a part of doesn't use the Viva system yet, but my very first PhD student was registered at a university where they had the Viva system, and this was some years ago, and I was very privileged to be a part of the panel, obviously as the supervisor, to just watch and to observe the process. And since then, I've obviously watched and observed a few more. And I think that there is often, people sometimes think of it as a test that it must be feared, but it's actually an opportunity for you to own your scholarship and to speak with authority and to share the passion that carried you through the research process. This is where your ideas literally come alive. And so as daunting as it might seem, like, I don't want to minimize it and say don't be daunted, but I think that some reframing, if you can think of it as your opportunity, you don't just do a thesis because you just think, I kind of like this topic. I believe you do a thesis because it's your special interest, because it's something that keeps you awake at night, because that topic is something that you are infinitely interested in. And if you had the chance, you would talk about it all day, every day. And imagine, this is your opportunity to do that with people who are actually there specifically to listen to you. It is a privilege. And I think all privileges might make us nervous. And so it's okay to be a little bit nervous and anxious, but you can use that anxiety to fuel your work, right? So how is it different? Somebody asked earlier, how is it different to a conference presentation? A conference presentation is really about you speaking to the findings of your research, right? It's speaking to a very broad audience. So it's often about speaking about one particular aspect of the work that you have done. So if I was going to present at a conference, it's very likely that people would expect you, for instance, if you've written a book, unless you're doing a book panel, which we don't always do, you would be presenting on a chapter. Right, and that is sufficient in a conference setting, right? You present on a chapter, you make the chapter something that stands on its own, and you speak to it because there is a conference theme and a conference topic. At your Viva or your Viva, that your thesis is the topic, right? You are the only presenter there. So you have a panel that is constituted of experts, and they are there to listen to you talk about your thesis. So I think maybe a better way for me to approach this is to give you an idea of some of the myths about the thesis defense. So that you have to answer every question perfectly. It's okay not to know everything. You must be clear and thoughtful in your responses. And when you're unsure, you can, literally, when you are unsure, you can admit that. I think it's very endearing and it's very human, and I've seen very positive responses to it. And missing a question doesn't mean you're going to fail. Please, no one on the committee wants to tear your work apart. It is an academic conversation. We want to collaborate with you. We are not, your committee would not even be, they're not even considered reviewers in the sense that you consider peer reviewers. They've read your work and they're there to ask you questions about it and to give you the opportunity to respond to those questions. The third myth is that if you fail, you'll have to start over. Total failure is very rare. Usually your supervisor won't allow you to go to your defense, to your Viva, unless they have a very strong, they very strongly feel that you are going to pass. And yeah, like, I mean, I don't know of a case where somebody has failed their Viva. Most outcomes involve revisions and not rewriting. Revisions are a very normal part of theses, of thesis writing for masters and for and for PhD students. Usually your examiners, even when for your written report, they will pass your thesis or they'll pass it with minor or major corrections or revisions. It's just a very normal part. We always expect revisions. So please don't be discouraged by that. Actually welcome it, because it gives you an opportunity to strengthen your thesis and to strengthen your work. You must prepare thoroughly, but don't aim for perfection. Perfection is not possible. And I think as you develop your proposal, as you then develop your thesis, to just keep a positive and a confident mindset, right? And I think that when you stay positive and confident, it also gives you the intellectual humility that you need in order to understand that while the work is deeply personal, it's not about you. So anything and any feedback that you can receive to enhance the work is not really about, it's not about critiquing you or highlighting your shortcomings, but it really is about improving the work so that it can have greater reach and it can be more well understood. Okay, so I've given you some tips for the oral defense, which is your Viva. I've also given you some tips on how to organize your slides. And again, you will do this in consultation with your supervisor. But this is again just a opportunity for you to have a look or have a peek of it before it becomes before you actually have to do it. So this is insight that I'm offering you here, and you can go through it at your own leisure. Something I did want to just touch on here is possible examiner questions. So these are questions that I have experience of, but I also did a little bit of research. And so these are some of the questions that usually come up. Clarity and substantiation. So asking for further clarity, claims that need stronger evidence or justification. So these will be pointed out to you. You likely haven't seen them, or your supervisor missed them, because remember, you get very close to your project, right? And then you don't see the wood for the trees, or the trees for the forest, whatever that saying is. So again, an opportunity to make the work better. Methodology and analysis is another area, asking you to clarify your original insights. And this is so important. This is why I said from the moment you start your proposal, you need to know what it is you are offering. How you navigated obstacles during your study. I cannot even begin to tell you the amount of theses that I have examined where students have had to change their research so substantially because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And you know what? It actually was it's always so inspiring to see how students are able to navigate and shift through these challenges. And so don't be afraid of recording those, and also of showing up and showing how you manage to overcome those challenges. Limitations and underdeveloped areas. There might be an area in your thesis that you might not have thought was important enough to elaborate on. This is what examiners might ask you to do. And then, and then you see what the rest is over there. So those are the questions that I have. And I think that, sorry, those are the questions that I hope would be useful, and I hope that you'll go back to this presentation when in 3 or 4 years' time for the PhD students when you are ready to submit, and I hope that this will be useful to you. But I want you to also think that oral defense, that viva, is not just an exam, it's a celebration of your intellectual journey. And it's when this work that you spend so much time literally writing, when you can finally give it a voice, and that voice is your voice. And in that moment, you are there as the expert on your topic, and you engage in a conversation that's not just about your knowledge, but it's also testing your ability to think critically and to respond with clarity, and to show how your work contributes to a wider body of knowledge. So let me just go back to the Q&A and see if there's anything that I have missed. Is the PhD structure similar for all disciplines? Yes, it usually is. Obviously there will be preferences according to your supervisor might have preferences for things that they would like to perhaps foreground or move into the background, for ways they would like things to be presented. The structure, all the elements must be there, but how the final structure looks is something that you usually work through with your supervisor. Major structure is, it usually is a monograph, or it is a thesis by publication, right? So then I think it's 3 to 5 research articles are included, but those research articles are still they are still put into a thesis format where they need to have literature review with theoretical framing. You need to explain your methodology and all of those kinds of things. So so it is similar, but you have to leave room for flexibility. Colleagues, do we have any more questions, any more comments? I'm so sorry, I don't know what the protocol is for taking body breaks. So if you have been sitting here for the last hour and 45 minutes, thank you. But I will, if you don't have any more questions, then what I will do is I think I will bring the session to a close. And I really do want to thank each of you for your time and for your presence and your willingness to engage deeply in this journey of research proposal development. I know that this presentation for some might not have been as structured and I suppose technical as you might have expected, but I do hope that what I've been able to offer you, yeah, um, I hope that sorry, I just read a comment, but I will get back to that. But yeah, I hope that I hope that it's given you some tools to think about your research journey and to think about what your contribution is going to be in a way that is not just determined by what we have to do in order to get it done, but rather by the things that really inspire you to do this work. So I think that it's also just important for us for me to say to you that whether you are exploring, I don't know, social justice or data science or feminist studies, your work has the power to shift narratives and to build communities. So I hope that today you'll walk away with courage from the session and with some clarity as well, and with a sense of purpose, because you know what, like I said, you are knowledge makers, you are knowledge producers, and you're doing important work. And the work that we do in the academy, it matters. And so I'm really excited to see what it is that you produce. What are the key issues included in the abstract of the proposal? Oh, thank you for that question. This is not, there is actually a abstract writing session that I think you can just look on the calendar. There is a session that's held specifically for that, because it is a really important question that you're asking, and it does actually require quite a bit of engagement. I won't be able to cover that today, but the key issues included in the abstract of the proposal and the key issues included in the abstract of the thesis, they will align. So please do join that session when you can. When it is hosted, so you can check the calendar for that. But unfortunately, I won't be able to cover that in the few minutes that we have left. Anonymous, was also stressful as you've started working on your proposal whilst waiting for a supervisor to be appointed. I've reached out to various individuals. Those who responded can't help, and those who are the ones with answers don't reply. I'm really sorry to hear about that. I really don't have, like I said, I'm not sure what the specifics of your case are, but there are going to be open sessions where you are able to pose questions. So please do check the calendar for when those are. And then I would really urge you to attend and to ask your question in that space, so that you can get the responses that you need. Are there any more questions related to the proposal development, the Viva, what the research proposal is? I think we've covered that quite extensively, and also what the thesis is. Anything else you'd like to ask or share? We started with 77 and now we have 59 attendees. I think that's quite good. I really did enjoy doing this with you this evening and being here in the space with you. And I really do wish all of you the absolute best. And I encourage you to keep going. And that's it for me. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye, colleagues.